Pokemon, it feels like that's got to be, what, the earliest of the top 15? That's got to be
one of the
oldest.
earliest.
It was still in that time where we're like, South Park wasn't enough. We had to go do mini film shoots whenever we could. And so a lot of times we'd make these fake commercials within South Park. And we decided to make all these commercials for these other toys. And again, it's so crazy because it's just part of this one sketch of the show that doesn't even really matter to the show. And the fact that we would spend a bunch of time going out and doing film shoots for that little bit of a joke that you could animate, I don't know why we would do that.
I don't know why we did that. I mean, this was obviously a Pokemon thing when Pokemon was taking over the world, and it's like, well, what if they really were like, these little chips are implanted in each one? And then, I mean, Trey speaks Japanese, or some Japanese from take it in college and stuff. And Chimpoko, what is it? It means penis, right?
Yeah,
Chimpoko
it's little penis.
There we go. Of course, of course it does.
But it was the same kind of thing where as soon we knew that Pokemon was a big deal, but we had never really watched it. And so whenever we do a show, we've got to say, okay, well, now we've got to study it so we know what we're making. And watching Pokemon, I think we were all just sitting there going, what
it was like collect all the Pokemon so that you have all the Pokemons. And then how they made that, well, they made that part of a show and part of a story where collecting Pokemons was the most important thing, because if you collect the Pokemons, you can be a Pokemon master. And then all this stuff, and you're watching going, okay, well, what's the story of this show? And then you realize it's just like a gigantic thing to brainwash kids into buying these junky things. And so we just kind of made that into a big story. And this episode also has our friend Junichi Nishimura does a voice in it, doesn't he?
Yeah,
he plays
one of our animators.
Does he play the Emperor, or does he play
the general? Plays the main guy, yeah.
Yeah, so the Japanese guy you hear on that is Junichi.
And actually, there's a character in it, this other Japanese guy who's always talking about how small his penis is. They both are. But that actually came out of, we were visiting Junichi, actually, in China. He was working in China at the time. And Matt and I went to Beijing, just to say we went to Beijing. And we went there and we're hanging out with his boss,
Mr. Osei,
whose name was Mr. Osei, and he just kept telling us about how small his penis was.
Yeah, we went out drinking, and he kept telling us about how small his penis was, and how Americans have big, big penis, and you're so lucky, and my penis is so small.
And we're like, that's
so small.
That's going right into a show. That's going into a show.
It's just how small his penis was.
Yeah.
I love that guy. He was a cool guy. Small penis, though.
All About Mormons is an interesting one for fans to pick, because actually I remember when we did that episode, it didn't make a very big splash. And in fact, a lot of feedback we got where people were kind of like, what was that? And it's one of those shows that really got more of a cult following as the years went on. But it was something that since we did Cannibal the Musical in college, and we had the idea of what other historical figures could we do as musicals. We always talked about the idea of doing Joseph Smith as a musical. And so this was just sort of a way to do it in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But again, it's really cool because it was just all about a song and having that song come back and come back and come back.
That dum 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 dum.
Yeah.
We did this episode actually right after we met Bobby Lopez, who we wrote Book of Mormon with. So 7 or 8 years ago, we met Bobby Lopez, and we talked about this idea of doing a musical. And then a few months later, we were doing a show in L.A., and we needed an idea that week. And we said, well, let's do this mini version of a Joseph Smith musical. And in doing that, we kind of realized that a Joseph Smith musical, that was probably just about enough. Because there was I think in the episode, I really don't know, I haven't looked at it, but I don't think there's more than 5 or 6 minutes of Joseph Smith musical stuff in it. And you kind of watch and go, oh, that's a perfect treatment of that. So then that's kind of plenty with that. So then when we talked to Bobby afterwards, we kind of moved off the idea of doing a major Joseph Smith musical, but we kept the idea of Mormons, and we ended up doing the missionary thing, and that's what became the Book of Mormon. This is one of those episodes I think most people like. We like the end of it, and it was always supposed to be the end of it. And some people have given us crap for our atheist friends that in the end, the Mormon kind of just says, look, I know these stories are goofy and stupid, but they make me happy, and I love my family. And so you suck my balls, Stan. And then that's the end of the show. And it kind of has this, it kind of leaves Stan going, oh, well, I didn't get the point of that. And I really like that end, but some people thought it was a crap out end, but for us it was always where we were headed. It wasn't a crap out. That's exactly where we wanted to end. So that's cool that fans like that.
Yeah. Christian Rock Hard show came about. We actually were always going to make just a Christian album. And part of the idea, and we were doing this with our friend Pam Brady, who we did a lot of early South Parks with and did Team America with. And let's make a religious album, a Christian album, and try to release it, get a label, but make it that all the undertones were, if you really listen closely, it's like, no, I think this person's actually in love with Jesus.
Right.
And we were going to actually spend the time to do all that and try to get it in undercover. And then, of course, as most things, it ended up just getting swallowed up by us. It was like, okay, how can we do it?
We were going to go to like Christian conventions and like have our little album and like buy it, and you take it home and you start listening. It's like the body of Christ, and it's about what a hot body Christ had. You're like, wait a second, what? And we were going to thought that was such a funny joke, but of course we're not going to spend the time that it would take to do that. So we put it into a show.
I love that. It was great because it ended up with a lot of songs, a lot of pieces of songs, and a lot of those songs that are in that show, I actually wrote a lot of longer versions to, but I have no idea where they are now, but but it used to. You know, it's sort of, it's out now, it's kind of cool because that was quite a while ago now, and looking back on it, you can see some of the undertones of Book of Mormon and stuff even in that show, where, you know, some of the same kind of innuendos and stuff like that.
The show also has that weird thing that Cartman, strangely, is really into photography. I was like that's one of the funniest, weirdest little, like, weird Cartman idiosyncrasies is he's actually really good at and really into photography and has really nice photography equipment.
Yeah, there's a few shows where if you really pay attention, you can see he's actually really into photography.
That's why that makes me laugh.
I can see why fans would vote Tally, and I mean, Tally would have, it's just such a pivotal kind of South Park show, and it was another one of these things that's like, okay, the end of a run kind of idea, where it was just like so ridiculous and so like, okay, we're going to create this character that nobody's going to care about, and of course people ended up loving him.
The original idea was to just make fun of creating a character that's like totally worthless and stupid. And that, of course, would be a towel. Maybe fans like it because he smokes pot. Maybe that's just the big commonality here between all these episodes. The more weed-oriented, the more popular it is.
But I remember we took the time to actually shoot that commercial for the Tally T-shirts.
Yeah.
Which I don't even, looking back, I don't even know why we did that. I remember doing it in our offices and like having Adrian, the guy.
Well, because that was the joke. The joke was like, okay, we made a character and we're immediately going to put it on a T-shirt. We're immediately going to try to sell you it, even though it's obviously the worst character of all time. So I guess that's why we shot that stupid commercial.
But it was that same kind of thing where we even came up with, like, once we came up with the runner of the boys just wanted to play video games, and even though this crazy stuff was going on behind them. And I remember that long shot at the end where the boys are sitting there playing and all the things happening behind them. And it's like, okay, we're actually aliens and you know, talking like that. I remember that shot at that time took us forever to do because it was still back at the time when we couldn't do really long shots that were really involved because we just didn't have the computer processing power that a shot like that would take just hours and hours and hours to render. And so now we can do it pretty quickly. But back then, that shot was a big deal.
Don't forget to bring a towel.
Coming to number 10 is Major Boobage, which is totally cool because this is another one like Good Times with Weapons or Warcraft that is like around an animation style, and this time being heavy metal. We
had to watch it again in order to do this show, and we're like, wow, it really is bad.
Yeah, really but bad. You always remember it a little more fondly than you go back and watch it and go, oh, that was such a big deal. But it kind of was, I guess, back then because there wasn't any like adult animation. It's like, oh yeah, heavy metal, I love that movie. It's like, well, you remember the chick on the cover with the big boobs. It was like we came up with putting just boobs, just boob land. We did just about kill our staff with this one. And this was one that we even though we had lead time on this, even with the lead time, because of how involved and hand-drawn it all was, it was just like, we're going to need to wait till the end of the run to do this because they need every Wednesday they have free to come in and try to do the scenes for this. I don't remember anything else from Major Boobage. Well, just it being major pain. The trippy part when Kenny starts to trip on Cat Pee. Butter's Bottom Bitch was actually the weirdest one, I think, for us to see on the list. Yeah. Because I mean, we like that show fine, but it wouldn't even enter into, I think, our... It's super funny, but it doesn't seem to have that kind of like, why would that, of all the Butters episodes, why would that be the one that sticks out in people's mind? But I don't know. What's funny about it, though, that people probably don't even know, is that there's this B storyline going along where the detective is pretending to be a prostitute. And is basically the whole joke is that he just waits way too long to say free. And that's actually a joke that we came up with like years and years before South Park. We were actually on the set of Orgasmo, I think. Oh, yeah, that's right. And we first started doing that kind of sketch. And we're like, oh, we should do a sketch where a cop does it. And we forgot about it for years and years and years. And then we kind of remembered and put it in this episode. So it's kind of cool now looking back at it because it actually is this classic sketch of ours that finally made it into a show. But
other than that, it was just a real basic idea of what can we see Butters do.
Yeah, and what's the HBO's Pimps Up, Hose Down?
Yeah, Pimps Up.
And one of the crazy things about it is the language that they use in this, all this code of the pimp-ho relationship and stuff, and just there's just nobody funnier to see say really raw shit than Butters because he's just so cute and obviously doesn't know what the hell he's saying. I guess that's why that episode. I don't know. This was a big surprise seeing this one on the list for us.
This was the dark horse.
Coming in at number 9. It was a seminal moment because I can see why fans picked it, because we'd made fun of a lot of religions and then we finally decided to just make fun of Scientology. I mean, more people do it now, but at the time that was just considered like crazy, you know, and luckily we had some allies in the Comedy Central legal department. They were like, yeah, if you do it this way and you do it like this, you can do what you want legally. And I think immediately it was a pretty popular episode, but then the episode got really kind of infamous when they tried to pull it off the air and kind of make it disappear. And that's when fans I think that is part of why fans almost had to like make it one of their favorites.
That's when it became
you don't do that. You know, it became bigger from them reacting against it.
All those Scientologists really kicked themselves or shot themselves in the foot by doing that, because that made the show big. We
felt like, come on, man, we've made fun of everybody, you know. I mean, we've made fun of every religion, including the religion of people we love, and you know, and this shouldn't be any different. You know what's cool about this episode and why it's cool that it's on this list, and what kind of makes us feel good, even though we didn't mean to do this when we did the episode. A lot of times the first time a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old or like somebody who's kind of lost walking on Hollywood Boulevard hears about Scientology is when someone walks up with a copy of Dianetics or an e-meter thing, and now there's this whole generation of kids who this is the first time they heard of Scientology was this episode, making fun of it, and that's kind of cool. And we didn't mean that, and we didn't think about that till afterwards, but when Scientology tried to make it disappear, that just doesn't work anymore. And in fact, like Trey said, worked totally against them and sent it into supernova because people had to embrace it. I mean, I can see why Osimo's on this list of fan favorites, because it's Cartman puts himself in a terrible situation, and you have to watch it unfold. And I remember when we came up with this episode, we really liked just the way the story developed, how it was Cartman doing something and getting caught, and then, you know, kind of fucking himself, and that's just always really satisfying with a character like Cartman. And I remember when we came up with the thing of like him having to like be Cartman and be like lame and say it like a robot, that we just thought that was super funny. And
we always love when we have a great Butters and Cartman show. You know, when you have those two as the main characters, it's like it's a little easier to write than the others, just because they're such great characters. And so definitely either this or the death of Eric Cartman would have to be on my top list too.
But my favorite part of this episode is definitely when he eats the toothpaste. That makes me laugh like hell every time I see that. Like, just so hungry, just fucked himself so hard, and now he has to go in and literally just eat toothpaste because he's so hungry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of the reason that fans really like this was the same reason we did. That you're kind of watching Butters win the entire time. You're kind of watching, Butters at that point in the show had been screwed over so many times by Cartman, and this time Cartman was finally getting what has come to him for full-on almost the entire 20 minutes of the show. So I think that that's what fans are reacting to. If someone would have told us that the fans would ultimately end up voting Fish Sticks one of their favorite episodes, when we were coming up with that idea for it, we would have just been like, no way. That whole thing started, we were on a writer's retreat in Seattle, and we were at the Ballard Locks, which is just this place where you can see salmon jumping out, going up the fish ladder and jumping out. And I don't even remember how it happened. We just started talking about Kanye West being a salmon.
Kanye did a video where he dressed like Evel Knievel and did that whole Snake River thing. So it was like somehow the wires got crossed, and it was like Kanye's a salmon. And then I remember, because Bill Hader was on that retreat.
Yeah.
At some point, Bill and I ran over to the computer to type in fish sticks to see if anybody's come up with a stupid joke before. You must have. It's like, do you like fish sticks in your mouth? It's just so dumb. And no one had. And it was like, no one's come up with this dumb joke. That's a sign.
And it was like, you know how fish sticks actually could work is if we say it's the dumbest joke ever.
Right.
But even then, if you would have said that the fans ultimately would vote on it to be one of their favorites, we would have been like, no way, because it was one of those shows where it was like, well, we'll do this show in the middle of the run when we're really tired, and you know.
Yeah. This episode, there's a song at the end,
You know,
and that
in
song's
a lot
great.
of these fans, there's songs. They're ones with memorable songs, and I'm just realizing that a lot of these episodes that fans picked have songs.
I mean, that song is great.
That's
That auto-tune song at the end, and Trey had to learn how to not sing, to sing so the auto-tune sounded auto-tuning.
Well, I had never used an auto-tune thing before like Kanye uses, and so I realized that if you can actually sing, it doesn't work. It doesn't do anything to your voice.
It doesn't make
so
it
you
sound
actually
that.
have to sing off-key in order to make it give that auto-tune sound. So, and singing off-key is actually difficult to do.
Not for me.
If you've
Not for me.
taken a lot of voice lessons.
That's why I'm an awesome singer, because I know how to sing off-key. Well, the weird thing was, after this episode, it was, you know, like, what's Kanye going to say? And, you know, especially because, like, rappers don't have, like, the greatest track record with gay humor and being accused of being gay somehow, even though it's gay fish, and we didn't say he was gay at all or anything. But, like, you could see somebody overreacting to that. Because the whole point of that episode was, like, Kanye, you get a sense of humor. You seem so humorless about yourself. 2 days later, that Kanye wrote some blog or something, or, like, I don't know, on his website, and it was all caps. You're right, I've been a real crappy guy lately, and I need to grow up, and I need to learn to be able to, like, laugh a little bit. And we're like, that was weird. That's not what we expected. It was like this complete mea culpa. But then he put on his album, Choke a South Park Writer with a fish stick. So he is mad? Or maybe that was just a gentle...
Maybe he's just being funny.
Yeah, it's definitely in my top 10. And a lot of it, my biggest memory of it is just that it was one of those episodes where we couldn't think of anything, and that's what we came up with. It was the end of the run, and it was actually the run right after we did Team America, so we were exhausted. And we got through 6 episodes, we had to do one more, and we could not think of anything. And it was one of those where it's happened a few times, where Thursday we're sitting there all day, nothing. Came back Friday, nothing. And then Saturday morning we kind of had this idea for a show. It was just like, well, we're just going to have to get something on the air. All we had was blood orgy. We were just like, critters at Christmas, having a satanic blood orgy. That's all we had.
Once we said blood orgy, it was like something. At least that's something.
And it was just one of those shows that went from being absolutely nothing and really thinking you were screwed and you were going to get nothing on the air to suddenly within 48 hours being like, oh, this is pretty good.
And then on Sunday, I think you came up with the idea of doing the voiceover and having
making it all Cartman's.
Having it being Cartman's story and giving it a reason why you could have this like narrator that's speaking in these rhymes, like this Dr. Seuss tale, and then revealing at the end that this is all in Cartman's head, like to reveal like why critters are even doing blood orgies and what the hell this whole thing is. It's one of my favorite episodes. It's my favorite Christmas episode we've done. It's so insane.
And we probably did, we did that whole show really in 3.5 days.
Yeah, 3.5 days. And
it's
it's a really cool episode. It's a huge mystery as to why medicinal fried chicken is on this fan list.
It's funny because, like, for us, we've been seeing in fans them really, in the past few years, moving towards Randy really being a favorite character. And obviously, for the longest time in South Park, he was just Stan's dad, and he was just there to serve that purpose. But through a lot of different episodes, people are really fans are really starting to, we want a Randy episode, we want a Randy episode, and I think it's just another... You know, it's a really, as a really good Randy episode, I can only guess that that's why fans were really into it, because Randy wheeling his balls around in a wheelbarrow is pretty Randy.
There's this old KFC that when the medicinal law changed in California, it turned into a pot shop. And it's like the raddest, and I drove by it one day, and it's like an old KFC, and then there's just pot leaves all over it. I don't think that's where the idea came from. I think we started talking about it, and then somehow we brought up just how trippy it is in society, how something is getting slightly more legal with weed, and they're at the same time making fast food illegal in a lot of places, or literally like you can't open a fast food restaurant in parts of South Central LA. And so we started talking about that. And then somehow KFC or MFCs came up.
So it's either fans' love for Randy or Kentucky Fried Chicken that made this popular.
I don't know what else it would have been.
Yeah, Good Times with Weapons, you know, a lot of times when we're doing a retreat, we're talking about going into a run, we'll try to think of something we can do that's a bit different animation-wise. Because if we're going to do that, we've got to get ready for it. Same with the Warcraft episode. We've got to kind of plan it out a little bit. You know, we've got to get all our illustrators and animators sort of do some R&D on it. And so with Good Times with Weapons, we really had to take some time to get a look down and then decide what the show is going to be.
We've done it with a few episodes where we've just taken an animation style and go, let's do a whole show about that. And a lot of those episodes are on that list, on this list of fan episodes. So, I mean, part of the reason we can do it is because our storyboard department is so strong, and we go to them and go, okay, what do you think the boys would look like in you know, imaginary anime style? And these guys do it, and it looks like pretty right. It looks pretty authentic, you know.
For years now, you've been able to go online and see some things that fans have done on their own.
Right.
That looks like South Park anime, and it's like, wow,
yeah.
what people can do now to just at home, what they're doing to look like anime,
yeah.
and they do it South Park style. It's pretty cool. If you type in South Park anime basically on a search engine on video, you know, you can really see some cool stuff now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is one of my favorite episodes. It really is. I just think that the way the art adds a whole other element to it. It feels like a very big production. I also really like the end where Cartman sneaks across the stage naked. I think the animation of that, after all that awesome animation and after all this like cool like anime shots, it boils down to like a little boy with this little bitty like 2-pixel penis just like sneaking across the stage. I love the way that's animated.
I like how, because when I was doing the Japanese song in it, I was able to finally use the new Japanese accent because I got so used to it. I've been in Japan so much that was Japanese people used to talk like this. Now they all talk like this because they're being taught to use their tongue. So I would be like, hey, let's go, just by hanging your tongue out. And that's what makes it sound authentically Japanese now.
That's a great song.
I remember with Scott Tenorman Must Die, it was for us, it's a big milestone in South Park only because it was the first time we realized maybe we're trying to do too much in episodes. And it was the first time that we're like, wow, there's really not a C story in this. We've just got this one A story of Cartman versus this guy. And it turned out so good that we really from then on started saying, let's forget B stories, let's forget C stories. For a while, we really were let's just do a really well-told A story. That was the biggest lesson we learned from that episode.
Because the first whole part of that episode is just Cartman, cat, and mouse, with just keep going back to Scott Tenorman with the pubes and that whole thing, and it didn't ever cut to a different thing.
Let's just have it keep going back and forth. We kept bringing up, you know, Coyote and the Roadrunner and stuff like that. It was just kind of that kind of episode. And I know that the reason that a lot of the fans picked it was because it was such a Cartman-defining show.
Yeah.
And it really was for us. It was a big deal to kind of say, when we came up with that idea of the fact that Cartman actually does finally one-up this kid in the sense that he kills his parents and feeds them to him. We were sitting there going, can we do this? Can we do that to Cartman? Is that okay? And we're like, yeah, let's go for it. Let's do it. Let's do it. First came out, there was a big kind of
it's like, whoa,
fans. Some of the fans were like, oh,
such a dark place. It's like you don't want a little boy to like, because we had to make it so like he didn't kill them, but he had them kind of killed passively. We thought that was too far over the line if he was to like go slit their throats or something. The end of that show, you're like, okay, nothing's ever quite the same with that character again. But also, we can't forget this is Radiohead's in this episode, which is pretty cool. So I guess the first episode is Make Love, Not Warcraft. You know, it's the most popular episode of all time, South Park. And I remember you got Warcraft, and you're like, I'm going to see what it's all about. And then you're like, we got to do an episode about this. And I just thought, like, what? This little game? This silly little, like, online games? I really didn't get the scale of it. Through doing the episode, and then afterwards, I've realized that it's a humongous deal. And isn't, like, Warcraft, like, third biggest state or something? If you add everyone up who's, like, on Warcraft, whatever, it's like the size of a large city or something. So it doesn't surprise me that it's like the most popular because like we actually did it. And then the cool thing about this episode is we did it in conjunction with the people who make the game.
Which really first came out of necessity just because we were talking about, okay, how do we do that? We need to have the show, but then we need to have this game look. And we were talking to our animators and they're like, you know, actually to do that in 3D and everything, that's going to be tricky. We have to model everything. And then we came up with the idea of like, well, why don't we just see if Blizzard will do it? We still have this thing sometimes where it's funny where we're like, well, why would Blizzard do something with us? You know, and it's like, well, it is South Park. Maybe they would, you know. So we actually approached them and ended up having Blizzard employees there in our offices. And it was the first time that I was actually directing people that were on computers live and say, okay, now you walk over here and then we need a shot of you hitting him with your sword. And it was very weird to be, it was almost like a virtual reality directing job. It was
so the shots in the show were actually gameplay. It was like that, we were recording one character's point of view. Blizzard was pretty cool. We ripped on them and they let us rip on them.
Yeah, they loved it.
Yeah, that was kind of smart.
I just remember the coolest thing I remember was that we actually, because the storyline started taking place where this guy had gotten so good at it that he could you know, he was starting to go in and kill everyone. He was basically hacking into it and killing everybody. And we had everyone set up on these Blizzard computers in our offices,
right.
and we're ready to start this scene. And suddenly this one character just starts jumping around on the screens, and we're like, wait, who is that? And the employees were like, someone's hacked into us. Someone's hacked into us. And it was like, what should we do? Should we get rid of it? Should we death touch him? Let's death touch him.
But it was almost like nuclear codes going up the level of like, to bust out death code or death touch or whatever in Blizzard was like, we have to ask permission, get double, you know, turn the keys. It was like a big deal, and they actually did bust out death touch and kill that guy, whoever it was that had hacked into the system. So
that's it.
That's Warcraft.
You can't just give up on the world of Warcraft.